Okay, good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining the second edition of the CME Cafes, today
Morning.
dedicated to entrepreneurship. As this moment was fought by a group of business people, and I have written recently an op-ed on the role of entrepreneurship in Malaysia and the type of entrepreneurship in Malaysia. I think that looking a little bit for our life beyond the MCO, if God will allow this, let's think about entrepreneurship in Malaysia. Okay, here we have Kerry is an entrepreneur. Chuan is also an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks.
Razim is an entrepreneur. And Dr. Sumita from Inti College is a lecturer lecturing about entrepreneurship. Right?
That's right. So I'm here just as an observer to get some input from all of y'all that will help me to relate better to the industry. Right?
Thank you, Sumita. And so I will start like we did last time with a theoretical introduction. And then I will apply this to the case of Malaysia, and we will try to explore how eventually would be possible to change the situation in Malaysia. So, by the way, the Center of Market Education is also about to publish a paper on this topic titled Entrepreneurs, One, No One, 100,000. This is just playing with the words of the title of an Italian novel that was in fact entitled One, No One, and 100,000. And the idea that we wear a lot of masks, but we never show our face. So it seems to me that the economic theory is never dealing with entrepreneurship. If you take a traditional textbook in microeconomics, there is no mention whatsoever about entrepreneurship. However, it is masked with decision-making, maximizing profit or minimizing costs. All these curves or the form of market like perfect competition or oligopoly, monopoly are presented as something that has somehow to deal with entrepreneurship, but the essence of entrepreneurship is never touched. Again, this is another demonstration that the dominant economic theory is talking about something which is not related with our life. Indeed, how can we imagine an economic system which doesn't deal with entrepreneurs, without entrepreneurs? How economic life is conducted without the decision-making process made by entrepreneurs? However, in non-mainstream economics, entrepreneurs were discussed. And in particular, myself, I dealt with two entrepreneurship theories. One is the one presented by probably the greatest theorist of entrepreneurs ever, so Joseph Schumpeter, 1883-1950, who developed the concept of creative destruction and dealt with the concept of entrepreneurship related to innovation. And the other is Israel Kirzner, still alive, born in 1930. And instead, he developed what I believe to be a lighter concept of entrepreneurship intended as alertness to previously unexploited profit opportunities. Now, let's discuss a little bit in detail these two approaches, but in a way that could be understood by people that doesn't have a strong background in economics. If you don't understand or if you want me to repeat some passage, just raise the hand and I will be happy to repeat, okay? Let's start with Kirzner. Entrepreneurs as people that are alert to previously unexploited profit opportunities. Okay? What this means? It means, in example, that an entrepreneur is someone that realize in a certain moment that a certain product is needed in a certain place where it is not available. So a certain product, in example, can be bought cheap somewhere as in some market and sold in a different market and make a profit out of it. This means to be alert to previously unexploited profit opportunities. Okay, so driving somehow the market toward a higher degree of coordination by bringing products from where they are abundant toward where they are scarce. Kirchnerian entrepreneurs are creating a higher degree of market coordination, so get people in general more better off. So you have consumers that are more satisfied and suppliers that have profit opportunities. According to Kirchner, this sense of alertness is somehow present in all of us at different levels, and we deploy it at different degrees during our own life. Sometimes we are entrepreneurs, sometimes we are not. Even when we found a better place where to buy our groceries, somehow this is an exercise of entrepreneurship, because we are exploiting an advantage for us. Okay, so entrepreneurship is latent in all of us, and in some individuals, periodically it emerges at a higher degree, at a higher scale, and they can make a profit out of this alertness. I mentioned that this concept of entrepreneurship is rather light because it doesn't imply any specific relationship with a product or with the discovery of a market or with a new technology. So it can be even simply trading. Okay, yeah, our friend here, so in example, Razim Ismail, is doing this kind of trading activities, buying supplies from overseas and bringing into Malaysia and trying to make a profit out of it. And this is entrepreneurship, like trying to build a new car, in example, or a new computer or a new product. So for Kirchner, there is no difference between these two functions. Instead, in Schumpeter, we find a much more radical approach to entrepreneurship. So for Schumpeter, the most important fact of economic life is indeed what he calls introduction of new combinations. He doesn't talk about innovation necessarily. This came only later with the people that interpreted Schumpeter. But Schumpeter calls about new combinations. New combinations are the essence of economic development. Without new combinations, the economic system simply tends to repeat itself without added value. And what are the new combinations? Schumpeter identifies 5 types: new products, new technologies, new way to do things, new markets, discovery of new raw materials, or a reorganization of the market. In example, moving from a situation of competition toward a situation of oligopoly. But these new combinations, in order to be carried out, according to Schumpeter, need the support of 2 additional elements: bankers that provide the purchasing power for these new combinations to be introduced in the economic system, and the most important one, the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur, for Schumpeter, is a special human being, so someone that has skills that are not to be present in normal human beings. and has the braveness to risk his own intuition, to risk his own substances and energies on the introduction of a new combination. Why, according to Schumpeter, the introduction of new combinations require special human beings? Because whatever is new encounters the opposition of normal human beings, of traditional people, of common people. Okay? I think it was Ford that was saying that if he had to follow what common people were telling him, he should have provided coaches with a higher number of horses, faster coaches. Instead, he introduced the automobile. Common people are not able to imagine a future without the framework that they are used to. We, common people, who never imagined a world with a computer when we were writing our documents with a typing machine. But someone else was able to introduce that innovation, to win the confidence of the market, and to revolutionize our life. We couldn't imagine nowadays life without computer. And life without computer was the actual normality no more than 30 years ago. Okay? Then for Schumpeter, the entrepreneurs are special human beings also because they are driven by a different motivation. According to common people, the motivation that drives an entrepreneur is not rational. Why risking everything on the expectation of a profit that may occur, but the level of risk implied is very high because you are risking on something that is completely new. It's not simply like bringing something that is in demand in a place from somewhere where this thing is abundant. Okay, it's much more the risk because you are risking on something new. And in fact, take a look at the innovations. The innovations never happen in traditional industries. When the Industrial Revolution happened, the common textile industry was the wool textile. The Industrial Revolution didn't happen in the wool industry. It happened in the cotton one, a new sector that was just stepping up in the economic world, and so was much more eager to receive new technologies in order to defeat the competition of the traditional industry. So which are the motivations that, according to Schumpeter, drive the entrepreneur? For him, the entrepreneur is more similar to a medieval warlord, to a medieval knight, than to a normal business person or manager. Okay? And in the entrepreneur, there is the desire to win like in a sport competition where you want to win for the taste of winning rather than for the money implied in the winning. So first, you are seeking the taste for winning. Second, you are seeking the desire of founding an empire, to create something that will be there forever. That is your legacy. So this is an aesthetic, if you want, attitude. Third, there is the joy for creation. The idea that something new is coming there out of your action and super action. That some scholar even compare the Schumpeterian entrepreneur with the Nietzsche superhuman. Okay, I don't know if some of you ever encountered Nietzsche in his philosophical studies, which are not very common in Malaysia, I'm sure, but the will of power, these kind of things are very, very much present in Nietzsche. Schumpeter, however, is very pessimistic about the evolution of entrepreneurship. He writes about entrepreneurship in particular in a book published in 1911, The Theory of Economic Development. But then in 1942, he published another book titled Capitalism, Socialism, and Democracy. And he says, I see around too many managers, and too few entrepreneurs. Capitalism is going to end, at least for the way in which we know it. And a capitalism made out of managers is the same like socialism. There is no more steam for innovation. Okay, so R&D offices will never be able to risk so much like an entrepreneur is able to risk. So I will stop here with the introduction on Schumpeter and Kirchner. Later you can make some questions. I want to keep the theoretical part brief and simple. And I want to put this within the context of Malaysia, okay? But this is not applicable only to Malaysia, it's also applicable, I think, to this region in general. I believe that in this region, so far, we have observed the prevalence of a Kirchnerian type of entrepreneurship, while Schumpeterian entrepreneurs have been very much lacking. I give you an example. When a few years ago I was working for a Dutch company, this Dutch company was producing plywood nests for chicken, where the chicken could go inside and lay their fertilized eggs. Okay. The main element of these nests was wood that we were importing from Malaysia and Indonesia, bringing back to Holland, transform into nests, and then export back to this region at a very higher added value. So once I was talking with our agent in Indonesia, and I said, why don't we think to make a joint venture here and we produce these plywood nests in here? Imagine the competitive advantage that we would have by using local labor and by avoiding the transport of the wood 2 times all over the world, 10,000 kilometers east and west, and then 10,000 kilometers back east. I say, no lah, malas lah. Better you do the technology. I will sell it here and make a profit out of it. I can understand if you can have a margin out of it. It's much more easy to trade rather than setting up a production facility. But in this way, we have the innovation process, the heart of the innovation process, remaining back in the Western world. Because in here, it seems that the steam, of course, we cannot generalize, there are always exceptions, but if we look at the main products, innovative products that are sold within this region are still products on which the brain is somewhere else. And this is a matter of fact. Now, and then I conclude my introduction so we can begin the discussion. How do I see the possibility for this to change? So in order to improve this region, we can, as the title of our session was, awake domestic creative entrepreneurship, domestic Schumpeterian entrepreneurship. I think that the main issue goes back to the education system. This part of the world has an education system that is mainly rooted into applied sciences, engineering, mathematics, physics. While, and I've seen when I mentioned Nietzsche, I didn't get very much feedback from your eyes. Humanistic disciplines are left behind. There is no systematic study of history, literature, geography, which is very much important to understand why in a certain country there is coal and in other countries there is no coal or oil. So geography and philosophy. I believe that these disciplines help to create a mindset that is more keen to doubt, to question things. Even in politics, is what Dr. Ishans is doing necessarily right? We should not simply react, oh, the government is telling to us to do so, so we must do so. Hey, we still have a brain. Maybe the government is not doing the right thing necessarily. And we should be able to question this, at least in the secret of our houses. So the same is for entrepreneurship. Engineers are not by nature innovators because they are taught and they are trained to apply certain well-known knowledge to a specific realm of problems. Instead, people that have drank a lot from the source of philosophy and literature, they see that how innovation can come from questioning the way to do things. So, okay, we have done this so far in this way. Can this be done better in a different way? Can this need be met better by a different product? Or not? Or we should keep on doing the same things? This is part, I think, of the interest for these things that is probably we go back even at a philosophical problem. So the different kind of religions and philosophies that have dominated different parts of the world, I think also play a role. But I always mention to my students when I was still lecturing, have you ever wondered why the Portuguese arrived here and did good and bad things and didn't happen the other way around? Why did the Sultan of Malacca did not think to go to Portugal or to see if the world was round or flat? So I think that this critical sense, this thirst for new things, can be educated and cultivated with a different kind of education that will probably in time, through probably 3 generations, bring a radical change in this part of the world. We cannot expect this to come from the West. The West will never have the interest to invest in this change, but this has to be a locally induced change, I think, and I think this will be eventually for the better. So on this, I will close my introduction hat and give the floor to you.
Yeah, that's a very interesting introduction there, Doctor. I was very interested in the comment that you made in your op-ed, and you duly repeated earlier about the catch-up growth that was played during the early stages of the industry boom in Malaysia, industrial boom in Malaysia. I think apart from education, political will too does make a lot of need. There's a lot of need for political will as well. I think they've been so comfortable in the way things have been for the last decade or so, and you know, the abundance of profit there available to them to make has also influenced a lot of policies. To change that is going to take a huge revolution, I think, in my opinion. So yeah, I think it's good that the conversation is starting, albeit with just a few of us here. But I'm sure the conversations are beginning to happening elsewhere as well. So I think yes, I think the way forward is to realize that creative destruction is something that we really need to look at as a society.
Yeah, Kerry, so you mentioned a good important point, the role of politics. But if we look at the history of Malaysia, we see how politics cannot be the driver for innovation. We have seen in the case of Proton. Okay.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this because this is very clear example. So at a certain point, the prime minister says to be a technologically advanced country means to have a national car, a national automotive firm, because this is what is happening in other countries. Instead, the reasoning should be exactly the opposite. If other countries in the past built their industrial success on a national automotive industry, so this is something already in the past. And as a younger country, I cannot think to go and compete with them. What should be done to make a difference? Where should I invest in order to build a competitive advantage doing something that others are not doing? Because if I do something that the others are doing, I will be always on the catch up.
Right.
So you should start something that is not present elsewhere. And I think we have seen this with Grab. On this, Malaysia and Southeast Asia in general is much more advanced than Europe. If I go back to my country, mobility is a hell if I don't have a car. If I don't have a car,
Yeah.
Okay. Unless you are rich, you can afford to spend something like 100 ringgit for 5 kilometers.
Wow.
Okay. So you have seen that, as I mentioned before, also with the example of the Industrial Revolution, the change happens not doing, just copying what others are doing, but bringing a change. Otherwise, it's not a change. So technological development is not importing industries from abroad, but to see if there is the room for doing something that others are not doing. And Grab is an example that, however, will have to be tested over time because it's not a successful example. I mean, has worked well because someone has pumped money in it, but at this moment is not yet profitable. So the time will say at which extent Grab will be sustainable in the long run. But this is precisely the mistake of politics. The politics is there saying, what should we copy in order to be like the West? And probably the only thing that we should copy is education. So not other things.
Right.
Yeah, Dr. Carmelo, I would like to point out also that the same thing happens in our IT industry as well. We tried to copy like Silicon Valley, like in our multimedia super corridor, like Cyberjaya and all this. But the entrepreneurs are just not ready for it. Like you don't see like super IT company coming out from so much money being invested in that place. Yeah, so it's like, even though the government tries to do something, but we don't have the right, like the talent pools and all that. So all the initiative just gone to waste. Like I don't know, like how does that work? Like how does the government helps, like instead of like disrupting the landscape? Yeah.
Yeah, it's fair. The government can see that something is good is happening elsewhere and try to promote like a local Silicon Valley, but we have seen Cyberjaya, I think, is very far away from being a local Silicon Valley. But this is normal. We have discussed, I think, 2 weeks ago, why government-led entrepreneurship is, by definition, a failure, because they lack the information coming from the market. They operate from outside of the market. So again, we don't need necessarily to copy foreign models, but we should look at a different way. So Grab was an example and met a demand. And I think that, again, if we want to multiply these kind of examples, the only real revolution that we need is an education revolution, because that will bring the change.
I'm actually thinking one question. Like, for example, in the taxi industries, okay, there are always an oversupply in the taxis industries, but why the taxis industry, they did not have a change to the Grab at the beginning. Maybe they develops into like on the spot delivery where they can pick up some goods and send on the same day as well. There are lots of models that in the market, but why? I'm not sure. Just asking. I'm not sure why the drivers that available in the airports, they're willing to wait for a long hours of time, complaining, but then at the same time they don't look for other ways like a delivery, on time delivery, something like that.
I think that one point is protection. So the taxi, we have seen this with Grab and with Uber. Taxi has always enjoyed the protection, and protection creates negative incentive to innovation. You are somehow protected, you know that your cup of rice will be there. But then if something happened, and actually it happened with Grab. This couldn't been born out of the taxi as a category. It required, as Schumpeter claims, an entrepreneur to bring the change. And this is what happened with Grab. So that went to disrupt the taxis, and the taxi that simply to adapt or to die. And you can see that if you go to the Glen Mary taxi deposit, the number of taxis there is rising and rising because creative distraction. So a traditional way to do things has been destroyed, and as Schumpeter described it very well in his books on business cycles, during the negative side of the cycle, the old businesses try to survive, but we cannot think to live in an old world. Now nobody will be crazy enough to bring back the typing machine or to go back to a world without internet, unless only the few followers of Greta would think that we can live in the woods, picking berries, and jumping around, eating mushrooms and these kind of things in order to make the sky clean again. So if we avoid the foolishness of Greta, then nobody is thinking that we can live in a pre-innovation world. Even now that we are forced to give up a lot of our innovations, we have seen how innovation is helping through the insanity of the lockdown. We have Zoom, we have food deliveries with the applications, you even don't need to call. So innovation is made imagine a world. Zoom is something relatively new. Okay, so even I think 5 years ago, we didn't have Zoom, or we didn't have WhatsApp calls. Imagine to be in the lockdown without WhatsApp call and Zoom. How highest the risk of mental illness, craziness, suicides would be higher indeed. Because imagine to live completely segregated for months without the possibility to do anything out of it.
Yeah, Dr. Carmelo, I would like to ask about this. The problem with the funding and capital in the local entrepreneurship scene.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like people wants to take risk, but like you said earlier, like you require like a banker sort of entity to like back up this kind of risk, because some risks are just huge. And in Malaysia, I see the problem is like nobody wants. I mean, you don't find a lot of angel investors, and venture capitalists. Most of them wants to fund something that is already working. Bankers want to see something that's already profiting and there's a business model backing it. So, I mean, if the business is already running, right? So the owners of the business will likely not want a fund and a part with equity. Yeah, but so the Malaysian like funding scene is a bit weird, and it's very hard to loan money from the banks. Yeah, so like we are really, our hands are pretty tight. Yeah, in terms of like capital.
This is true, and I think that there is a big lack of big private capital, not necessarily from the banks. So the banks need to be conservative, and it's good that they are conservative, because if things go south, then there is a risk for the saving of the people. So I agree that bankers, traditional banking, should be conservative. However, what we lack is private venture capital. So big investors like Warren Buffett, let's say, that decide to risk capital in industrial activities. And eventually, there is where we should look at the sources for financing innovation. There, I think, but of course, there is a limit in Malaysia due to the nature of our capitalism, but this can change because the more new economic initiatives can start, and we can think that they start, in example, in IT, which is an industry that requires less capital compared to other traditional manufacturing industry, then this creates, as a domino effect, positive spillover in more traditional manufacturing. Or even we can imagine that the typical Kirchnerian entrepreneur that is present here can one day jump into something different. So a trader that makes money out of trading becomes an entrepreneur because he can invest that capital into something different. So speculative capitalism that becomes supportive for creative capitalism.
So you are saying that it's like the talent pool has to make it attractive for investor to put money in.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that makes sense.
And also, I mean, I think that we should require also a new generation among the traders that are ready to become something more than traders, rather than living in their comfort zone of trading, trying to think out of the box a bit.
I just want to add up one point to the banking facilities. As the recent one, they have these peer-to-peer borrowing facilities as well. I guess the entrepreneurs can actually have the access of the credit facilities from what they call as a peer-to-peer funding.
And like cross-source funding, right?
Yeah, as what I know is that it seems like there are more and more of this kind of funding website. I'm not sure how good they are, but as I heard, the credit interest is a bit high at this moment.
But I have to add, sorry.
So let me just to comment this very fast. I think that we don't have to look necessarily at a high interest rate or relatively high interest rate as a bad thing, because this is a driver for capital. If there is no remuneration of capital, nobody would invest capital. So we cannot think people to invest money simply for a 0.0%. This would be utopistic. The banker, the capitalist, in Schumpeter terminology, should look at his own benefit. Otherwise, becomes an angel investor. But I don't believe in angel investors as a long-term possibility. Sorry, Razim.
No, back to the P2P lending. We have plenty like Fundastic and funding societies and so on. But it also shows that the market is actually we are lacking, like you mentioned earlier. So we are lacking someone big, like probably one of the biggest is Warren Buffett and so on, because this P2P is actually only addressing the needs of capital and matching it with retail investors. They take in 100 ringgit each and they just accumulate 1,000 people and so on. So I think the P2P, yes, it does satisfy the lack of alternatives besides banking. But at the same time, I think back to your point also, that's the more crucial part, where our businessmen, our entrepreneurs do not offer the best exit strategy or do not offer the best plans for angel investors to come in, or VCs. We just don't have that probably options. Our exit strategy is probably just IPO, or we are very limited in that sense. That's what I think. You know.
This is part in general of an entrepreneurial mentality that comes also with a business plan that is more than, I want to do this, please give me the money.
Yeah.
Because this is also part of the small businesses, and we should start to think more in terms of a strategy, of a plan, and something that makes worth the investment. This is part of all the maturity of.
Okay, sir, I have to ask on this particular part, how does it compare with the West when they started off, maybe 50 years back, 100 years back, when it started off in investing capital, taking in money from angel investors and so on? Is there any difference you see?
Well, actually, this process started back in the West much earlier than that. It started
Yeah, for sure.
probably 300-400 years ago. But indeed, what I mentioned before, the interconnection between trading and agriculture is very much related. In example, I think that if you study a little bit of history, you will find very fascinating the golden period of international trade, which is not now under the globalization, but was the period just after the Crusades. So the 13th century, the 14th century, then the 15th century. So in these centuries, there was an incredibly big level of international trade, considering the technological level. Yeah? So you needed months to go on the other part of the world. At that time, think about the spicy trade, which touched this area. So this area produced spices. Indian traders come to the Malacca Strait and buy the spices. They bring it back to India, where they encounter the Arab traders. The Arab traders bring the spices to the Middle East, and in the Middle East, they meet the Venetians, the Italians, and the Italians sell the spices all over Europe. Okay, so this was already globalization. It was fantastic. This was for spices, but I think that spices doesn't mean simply pepper and cinnamon. Spices at that time means also a lot of product for the most flourishing industry ever, textiles. So coloring, think whitenings, and those things were all under the voice spices. Now, Italians in particular from Florence and Venice were very smart traders in this. But when they became rich via trading, they started to open their manufacturing centers. I mean, it was not yet a centralized factories, but they were giving jobs to home factories. Okay, so you do this part of the textile process. So I will not simply do the trading, but I will find workers that do the different steps of the production process. Then this production process started to be brought into concentrated places for having economies of scales and making the production more efficient. And then when the steam power entered the picture, these things went very fast. But steam power was the element that speed up things, not that created things. Same like internet speed up things, doesn't create anything. Same goes with the airplanes, with all the communication. They add the steam to the things. But the bottom was the textile industry, not the steam power. Okay, there will be no steam power without the textile industry. Okay, and the same came from agriculture. There was immense amount of capitals coming out from the agriculture, and the more innovations in agriculture took place, the more the profit would raise and bring agriculture production into a different step. Okay, so this is to come back to the point. So that capital can come from somewhere. So if the traders think a little bit further down. And again, an history that is teaching us this thing.
But Dr. Carmelo, I also see this the issue that we have here in Malaysia. Like just now I mentioned that we have problem with capital, but then again, you see that we have a very flourishing industry in getting rich quick. You know, like in Malaysia, there is a lot of con jobs and like scammers doing their daily activities. So there's actually a lot of money flowing around. But yeah, like maybe yeah, like they are just not interested in something that is long term or something that they don't see? Or is it that the entrepreneurs are not like packaging themselves well enough? Like there is no proper platform or something, like people are just the entrepreneurs are isolated from the people, like because people are willing to put so much money. You see people get conned every day, like millions and millions of ringgit being put into all these scamming activities and all.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there is some capital going around, but it's just not going to the right places.
Well, or not yet, because this is typical in the black economy. There is money made with illegal activities that at the beginning keep on financing illegal activities, but then when they become a lot, they flourish into legal activities. It is the best way to, I mean in Italy we have quite an experience on that.
Oh, this scheme is coming from Italy, by the way.
So we have seen this with the mafia. The mafia gradually step more into legal activities, so because they are making more money with that. But the initial capital came from illegal activities, and they were able to channel it properly later on, and they financed some of the most fantastic property booms that we had in Italy. The development of Milan was built with the money of the mafia.
Yeah.
What about the Malaysian version of that? The Malaysia Inc.
We need more education to create also more skilled black entrepreneurs.
Just to add on to that also, because what we do, because I'm teaching in the MBA program and it's one of the modules, entrepreneurship. So in fact, it was also mentioned, I think, by Dr. Carmelo, that we need actually proper business plans, to get angel investors to come in. So that's something that we teach our students to write out. First, it's a feasibility study, then we go on to a proper business plan. The main thing that we highlight initially is to identify the pain point of consumers. That's what entrepreneurs should be doing. What is the pain of consumers? What is it that they want? And then, of course, once you've identified what exactly is the pain, then how do you bring in innovation and technology to address this pain? So again, like you mentioned, we were talking about taxi drivers and so on. There was always this pain point among consumers where we felt that we were exploited by cab drivers, taxis, and they were overcharging. They were not using meters. And so that's when, of course, with Uber and Grab coming in to address that pain point. So that's what we try to tell our students. So we hope that we are preparing them for the work environment to be entrepreneurs. So that's what we start with. And then we look at the ideas that they come up with. And we do actually, there are times when we get external entrepreneurs to actually come and evaluate the ideas of our students. So our students will actually make a pitch with their ideas. And then we get real life entrepreneurs to comment and see how they can improve on the ideas. So this is what we are trying to teach our students. But maybe also some input from you all also to see how we can actually better prepare them, because these students are the ones who eventually they are employed, by you, and, how well we can prepare them. That's one thing. And the other thing I noticed is that also, you talked about angel investors. Maybe in this case, in the Asian scenario, when we get investors coming in to invest, I think for entrepreneurs, if that sense of ownership of the business where, to have that passion to succeed may not be there, because it could be somebody else's money. So if it fails, yes, I lose a little bit, but the investors lose. Yes, my reputation is at stake, but that's about it. As opposed to, me having to borrow from the bank and then I have to pay the interest and all that. So then my commitment as an entrepreneur could be greater if financially I've got a lot more to lose, maybe that's one of the factors where that's why our entrepreneurs may not be really putting in so much of effort into running a business, because if it's somebody else's money, it's investors. So maybe that's why having investors coming in and all that is something which is, I guess, a popular option in Malaysia, as opposed to foreign countries where this tends to be a lot more, apparent, angel investors and all that coming in. So just giving my thoughts on that and your thoughts as well.
I will add the one thing on the first thing that you said, Sumita, because I think one thing that is lacking in the formation, in the education process of our future employees or something is field experience. But when I mean field experience, I mean field experience in factories. So, or in agriculture. Everybody want to be white and clean with the tie, or thinking about banking and these kind of things. But actual ideas comes from getting dirty. So if you spend some time in a factory doing some actual manual work in a factory, you can eventually think how something could be done better, because you see how things are done now. Now we have a lot of discussion about processes, procedures, KPIs, business plans, and these kind of things, but we have no idea of how things are made. So myself, in my role in my company, I cannot have ideas. So I always try to brainstorm with the people that are involved with the practical functions and say, okay, now you have done this function for 2 years. Do you think we can do this better, faster, more efficient? But the input has to come from people that have experience in the field. If all the people have the aim to do balance sheet analysis or accounting, then there is no much that they can learn in terms of the actual need of the people, because it's only by being a bit more dirty on the field that we can gain that skills.
Okay, so Dr. Carmelo, in your opinion, right, can entrepreneurship be taught in school?
No, I absolutely believe no. I mean, and if I look at the most successful entrepreneurs that we had in Italy, they were completely uneducated people.
Okay.
Because they were uneducated, they start working, and by doing a certain job, they realize what was necessary to do that product in a better way. Most of the successful entrepreneurs that I met in Italy were stopped studying at 13 years old. At the most, they had a vocational school, something that is also terribly underestimated in value. Vocational schools, I think, are very, very much important. So entrepreneurship, we can eventually study, like I mentioned, Schumpeter, Kirchner, theories of entrepreneurship, but you can't expect to be, rightly because what you have said now, to become an entrepreneur because you have studied entrepreneurship in school. Myself, I studied a lot. I know a lot of entrepreneurship theories, but I will never be a Schumpeterian entrepreneur. I don't have that in my DNA. It's not part of how I am, or it's not part of the environment in which I was raised up. Okay, even if I know all the theories of entrepreneurship, I've met people on which I'd be unable to speak about these things, but they run companies of 200 employees, and they created innovative products. One of the first person that I met in the poultry industry was a guy. It's a funny story. I was in Mexico, in Guadalajara, carrying my samples to an exhibition to prepare my booth. And on the way entering the exhibition hall, a guy saw me carrying these samples and offered to hand me a hand, to help me. And we start talking in English, blah, blah, blah. And then after we introduce each other, we discovered that we were both Italians. Okay. Of course, in Mexico, there's was not easy because our features are also very similar to the Latinos, so we couldn't have imagined that. This guy created a system for drying the environment within a chicken farm. And I've sold this system all over the world. He stopped studying when he was 13, and he always worked in a factory, created this system, and after having developed this system, he sold now the patent of this to a big American multinational company for billions of euros. So he can have his peaceful retirement. So, but he created this without any specific education, but by looking at things. Is another thing that I think we miss completely of the business world, looking at how things are done. If you are an entrepreneur, you have to go in your factory every day. That's why, let me open this, because I'm very critical about smart working. I don't believe in smart working. I need to see my employees in the face to see if I can ask them more or I have to ask them less, if they are burned or not, if they are motivated or not. I cannot understand this with regular Zoom meetings. I need to drink coffee with them.
All right, accepted. The practical experience along with the desire or passion that you mentioned earlier, I think those are the two critical things. Yep.
Okay, I think that if there are no other questions, we can close the session. We've been here for more or less 1 hour. Then I will send you the link of the YouTube channel where you can look at this record and eventually share it with your students, your colleagues, or your friends. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's
Thank you.
admit
Thanks,
Carrie back. And so, Carrie, we were about to close. So thank you very much. We keep in touch. We keep in touch for the next session.
It's over.
Yes, it's over.
I had some issues with my power bank.
No problem.
Yeah, I was just wondering. I wanted to ask a question just now. What do you think in terms of the GLCs and the Malaysia Inc. How do you think does that impede on the creative destruction? Is there?
Is a yes and no, in the sense that, of course, Malaysia is a very good example of crony capitalism. But it's also true that because of the lack of private capital, they exercise a function that was not exercised by anybody else. So we need, if we want to get rid of GLCs and all the bad problems that are related to it, and we can see how rampant is the issue with GLCs in these new days, we need the private entrepreneurs to do what we have discussed so far. So if a new generation of entrepreneurs can step up, then we can think the GLC to step back. Otherwise, there will be always the objection that certain things are not done if the GLCs are not there.
Right.
So we need to have someone proving them wrong.
Okay. Maybe we can take this discussion over a coffee, hopefully soon.
Hopefully soon, when this insanity is over.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.